I'm glad that he came out with a speech. He unveiled his budget in January. He gave a State of the Union address, and then 2 weeks later, he brought his budget forward. And the budget was, widely denounced. Even Democrats recognized it wasn't serious. And you just saw the press release 2 days ago from S&P concerned about whether or not we were going to be able to reach agreement and move back towards a balanced budget, putting a shot over the bow that if we don't take action in the next couple of years, we could potentially have our bond rating reassessed. That's very serious. So when the president came out and spoke, look, I was willing to read. If he was taking a mulligan, if he hooked the first one in the woods, the whole budget, and he took another ball out of his bag and said, I'll hit another budget, he hasn't resubmitted a budget. He gave a speech, but there's nothing behind it. There's no paper behind it.
There was some broad ideological standpoints. For example, he said, I am going to protect Medicaid and Medicare. He was quite strong in his rhetoric, saying that he felt that Republicans wanted to take the country backwards on those entitlement plans.
Well, that's not true at all. What we want to do is strengthen and preserve those programs. We'll talk about that in a second. But, if the president wants us to take seriously, if he wants to say, look, my first budget didn't make the mark, and I want to give a second budget so that I can get into the conversation now with the one that we just passed last week, then he needs to deliver it, because it's not enough just to make statements. I was willing to read the details of it. I read every word of the 72 pages of our budget proposal, and I read every word of the 30 pages of the CBO assessment of our budget proposal. And when I went to read the president's plan, there isn't one.
If we can't pay our debt and we default and people won't invest in the country, that's a problem. You're not growing the economy that way.
That's right. We can avoid this if the president comes to the table with serious spending cuts and structural changes. What we need to do is get our spending back below 20% and then cap it. Now, the president said he's willing to cap, but he wants to cap at 23 to 24% of GDP, federal spending in relation to GDP. You never change the trajectory. The president's budget, since he hasn't submitted another one, when you look out over the years to 2050, we end up with $120 to $125 trillion worth of debt. Whereas our plan is serious. It does take 26 years to get back to a balanced budget, but then we run surpluses, and by 2050, the debt is in half.